Another Sunday and World War III has not yet started. But did it become closer as a result of the decision wildly cheered not by the people of America, who could rather have done with the $80 billion that Congress finally sent to Taiwan, to Ukraine, and to the Netanyahu government of Israel? Even though the Netanyahu government of Israel is rapidly falling apart, Ben-Gvir savagely attacking Gantz this very day, the war cabinet is at war with itself in Tel Aviv. Even though the money sent to Taiwan wouldn't last 5 minutes if China really wanted to take its province back into the People's Republic. But the money that has gone to Ukraine might well be a precursor to all-out war between the superpowers in the eastern part of Europe, allowing, as it will, the kind of missile technology which will inevitably lead to the destruction of the Crimea Bridge, which Russia may well decide is the ultimate red line for her. But let's stay in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank for a moment. You remember when, I'm old enough to remember, when it was a blood libel to suggest that Israel would attack Palestinian hospitals in the Gaza Strip. Do you remember? It was a Hamas rocket that misfired. Do you remember? Do you remember the Western media, foremost amongst them the lying, twisted British media? Thank God you can't bribe or twist them. When you see what they'll do unbribed, you realize there's no reason to. You remember the British media telling you you were an anti-Semite if you suggested that Israel would bomb a hospital. Well, it's bombed every hospital. It's destroyed every hospital. That much you already knew. But now you know, at least if you're on social media, that they are uncovering mass graves in the Nasser medical complex in the last few hours. Dozens of graves, dozens of bodies have been uncovered. In the Shifa hospital complex, the mass grave has now reached 700 people in body bags, Israeli body bags, shot in the back of the head, executed at close quarters, usually with their arms tied behind their backs. A massacre of unimaginable proportions of people who were in a hospital, either as patients or as doctors or as nurses or as technicians. 700 dead bodies so far in that mass grave. Mass graves are turning up all over Gaza now that the Israeli occupation force has largely withdrawn from the ground in the territory. These mass graves will shame not just Israel, that is beyond shame, but will shame the Western leaders who have given it all of the wherewithal, all of the diplomatic cover at the United Nations and in other fora, often as banal as the Eurovision Song Contest, and even more banal, the so-called Paris, so-called Olympic Games. The Western leaders and their oppositions, for the most part, bipartisan support for the murderers in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Germany. It is a truly mark of shame, a shame that will never go away, a shame that will haunt the politicians responsible for the rest of their natural lives, and I dearly hope on the judgment day itself. These mass graves and the massacre yet to come in Rafah, where the pledge has been made by the United States to allow Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir and the other rampaging terrorist gang to assault a tent city of well over 1 million people, perhaps as many as 1.6 million people. Given that 80% of all the houses have been destroyed or damaged in the Gaza Strip, most of them are living in tents. Many of them are living without tents, in doorways and on the streets. A mass invasion of Rafah will turn out to be one of the greatest massacres of modern times, not seen since the Second World War. It will make Fallujah look like a vicar's tea party. But it's going ahead, and the United States have given the green light to it. They've given the green light to it in exchange for an end to the tit-for-tat between Israel and Iran. Of course, if you only watch the mainstream media, you don't know that there was a tit that begot a tat. You think the tat was all there was. You didn't know that Israel had destroyed the Iranian embassy in Damascus. If you watch the British Parliament, you certainly don't know that Israel had destroyed the Iranian embassy in Damascus. You thought, if you only watched the Parliament channel, if you only watched the BBC and ITV, you thought that Iran woke up one morning and decided to send an armada of drones all the way to Israel to futilely bombard it. But in exchange for an end to that tit-for-tat, Biden has given the green light to a mass assault on Rafah, which I promise you now will be the mother of all battles, but it will also be the mother of all slaughters. You will never have seen anything like the Israeli gang invasion of the tent city of Rafah. The United States stooped even lower in the United Nations this week, vetoing a proposal supported by everybody else except the cowards, the United Kingdom and Switzerland, to admit Palestine to full membership of the United Nations. An entirely cosmetic affair, by the way, would have changed absolutely nothing if they had allowed that resolution to go through, if the British had not been so spineless as the authors of the whole Palestinian tragedy in the first place, if they had not been so spineless as to abstain from voting, and Switzerland had not been so crazy as to throw away its long and much vaunted neutral status by abstaining on this measure, it would have changed absolutely nothing. It would have made President Mahmoud Abbas, aged 91, and in his dotage, presiding over nothing more or less than active collaboration with the Israeli massacres of his own people. It's taken me a long time to say what I have just said. I've known Mahmoud Abbas for nearly 40 years. In fact, it was 40 years ago that I first met him. And I have always wanted to avoid exacerbating the tensions that exist within the Palestinian people under occupation. But it can no longer be hidden. 91-year-old Abbas, 25 years beyond the mandate as president that he has an authority which is merely an adjunct and auxiliary of the Israeli occupation. He is openly intriguing with Western powers to become the ruler of Hamas and the Hamas-operated government in Gaza. He is openly intriguing with them to be given the Gaza Strip at the end of Israel's ethnic cleansing of his own people. And he's not the only quisling in this pack. The little quisling in Jordan, a country where more than half of the people are Palestinian people, and where 20% of them are Iraqi people living in exile following the downfall of the Iraqi government following the British and American invasion of their country. Sounds like a pretty shaky nail to hang your royal jacket on to me. But the Jordanian regime allowed its airspace, at least, to the Israeli assailants who tried to destroy Babylon. Imagine the ancient city of Babylon, more ancient than almost any city on the earth, was bombed by Israel this very week, using the airspace of the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. the series of betrayals that began 2 generations ago by the Jordanian monarchy continues apace, but maybe not for much longer. The situation in Washington has reached fever pitch. The President of the United States, ever more feeble, ever more unable to fulfill even toilet duties in his own White House. His challenger, Donald Trump, is in court after court after court and grilled by a delegation, a deputation from Netanyahu's government, promised to be just as slavish a supporter of Israel first as President Joe Biden is. It was his Republicans, by and large. Some brave souls opposed it, but it was his Republicans that allowed the US Congress to pass a eye-watering record bill which gave $80 billion to Taiwan, to Ukraine, and to Israel. All the while, the United States is falling apart. In every street of every city, the fentanyl and opioid epidemic has people walking like zombies down the middle of the road. Bridges fall down at the slightest tap. Highways are pitted as if F-35s had just bombed them. The poverty of the inner cities of America is there for anyone who'd like to see it. But rather than spend $80 billion on the people of America to make America great again, a bipartisan Republican Democratic effort was made finally at the weekend to get the bill through. Somebody passed amongst them, handing out Ukrainian flags. One of our guests tonight, Colonel McGregor, demanded to know who she was, why she was on the floor of the US Congress. Well, it didn't really matter, because the 2 cheeks of the same ass in the American political class were all waving them, all of them, waving and cheering exultantly as they robbed the American taxpayer of desperately needed public finance to finance the public realm in the United States. Not putting America first, putting Israel first, putting Ukraine first, putting Taiwan first. Now, the Taiwan money is a mere bagatelle. Some more patriots for the Taiwan puppet regime will make no difference at all if China decides to take back its renegade province. Netanyahu already has as much as he needs, as much as he wants from the United States, its military and its treasury. But he got another 26 billion just in case. That's on top of the 4 billion pounds a year that the 7 million Israelis get every year from the American taxpayer. The 26 billion will have been toasted, no doubt, by the warring cabinet of Benjamin Netanyahu. But the happiest man on the planet is the coke dealer of Volodymyr Zelensky, the now out of mandate president of Ukraine. His coke dealer can look forward to the mother of all new subventions. The amount of money that has been sent to Ukraine will no doubt prolong the war, unless the Russians decide it's time, finally, to end it. The Ukrainian armed forces, now conscripting women, pregnant women, old men, young boys, will continue to be hurled into the front line, a collapsing front line that may collapse like a house of cards if Russia decides that before this money arrives on the battlefield, it's time to end this conflict once and for all. But Zelensky is definitely strengthened in one way by this new money, because it's going to be used for a whole generation of missiles that can easily destroy the Crimean Bridge. That actually practically makes not much difference, because the land bridge from Russia proper to Crimea, the new addition in 2014 to the Russian Federation, is well established and will not ever be taken back. But symbolically, it will be a very, very grievous blow to the Russians if this money is successfully used to bring down the Crimea bridge. That's why I believe Russia is now at the end of its strategic patience with Western interference, with NATO incitement in the attempt to defeat and break up the Russian Federation. It's my belief that in Moldova there will be a significant Russian push to thwart the efforts to drag Moldova into the war. Is why I believe that the Russian armed forces will now turn south towards the liberation of Odessa and the link-up with the renegade province of Moldova by the name of Transnistria, which you probably heard here first at least a year and a half ago. The Russians cannot sit back, while endless subventions of scores of billions of dollars arrive from Washington in the form of new and more terrible military hardware. They have to bring this war to a close, and I believe that they will do so. I've only got time to spend a couple of minutes on the domestic political situation at home. Something is happening in Britain. Something big is happening in Britain. Being a political and election junkie, I spend every Friday morning studying in detail the results of local government by-elections up and down the country. By-elections caused by deaths or resignations or imprisonments, increasingly, of the British political class. Just today, in the Tory heartland of Fylde, a Tory MP resigned from the Conservative Party, having had the whip withdrawn a couple of days ago, charged with extorting money from a 79-year-old Conservative Party official, whom he phoned at 3 a.m. and demanded £5,000 in cash because he was trapped in a flat with what he called bad people. This man, Jenkins, was previously forced to resign from the government of Boris Johnson for a drug deal with a Brazilian drug dealer that went wrong. I'm not making any of this up. This is a Conservative MP at the fag end of a failing Conservative era. Mark Jenkins had to leave the government because of a drug deal with a Brazilian rent boy. I'm not making any of this up. With a Brazilian rent boy that went bad. When he resigned from the government, the Conservative Party made him the trade envoy to Colombia. Colombia! A man that had to leave the government over a drug deal with a Brazilian rent boy. And now he's alleged to have extorted thousands of pounds of Conservative Party campaign funds to get him out of a jam with bad people in a flat, God knows where. I look at these results and I think to myself, with this Conservative government falling apart, Labour must be all set to do well in these local government by-elections, except they're not. Not only are they not winning these local government by-elections, they're not even coming second or third. In last Thursday's by-elections, they came 5th, 6th and 7th in local council by-elections. The meetings I am attending and addressing in Hounslow this week, in Luton this week, in Newcastle this week, are attracting record numbers of people. Many hundreds of people are coming out to hear my message, which is this: anybody who votes Labour in the elections this year doesn't just have Palestinian blood on their hands. They are rewarding apostasy on a level that simply beggars belief. I used to call Tory and Labour two cheeks of the same arse, but now those cheeks are indistinguishable, have melded into that middle part that we never talk about. It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. Top guests, top calls. It's going to be a bumpy night.